And as a government, we do support the vulnerable, especially women and girls, through various methods or ways. For example, when it comes to documentation, the issue of documentation, fast-tracking, that is refugee status determination. We also support by way of making referrals, counseling, and we have got a vocal point staff based at headquarters and in other various camps within our Republic of Kenya. Therefore, we are fully supporting this process, and we are there for any kind of support. We are going to participate and support this process. On behalf of the Kenya government, we once again say thank you, and you are all welcome. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kandia, we thank you very much for those very lovely remarks, your opening remarks. Violence against women and girls is a human rights violation that's been perpetuated for decades. It's pervasive, but it's not inevitable unless we stay silent. That's a tweet that went out late last evening by @UN. It couldn't have been put more aptly. Please share your tweets as well. We will be happy to read them. Please use the hashtag 16days, hashtag #OrangeTheWorld. Our community on YouTube was raising concern that they couldn't hear us. Our technical team is looking at that, and they'll be back online as soon as possible. And now, I would now like to invite Fathia Abdallah, the UNHCR representative for Kenya, to give her remarks. Welcome, Fathia.
Good morning. Ms. Emily Obati, Ministry of Gender and Youth Affairs. Mr. Kandia, Refugee Affairs Secretariat. Mr. Sid Chatterjee, UN Resident Coordinator in Kenya. All partners, donors, NGOs, and private sector. Colleagues from UNHCR and UN sister agencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good morning to you all, and thank you for joining today's event. I trust that you and your loved one are safe during this challenging time of COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to welcome you to this roundtable discussion to commemorate the 16 days of activism against gender violence-based violence, which began yesterday, 25th November, and runs until 10th December, Human Rights Day. This campaign continues to give people and organizations across the world opportunity to raise awareness and stand in solidarity against gender-based violence, GBV. Not only in solidarity, but with concerted efforts and affirmative action to eliminate violence against women around the world. Fund, respond, prevent, collect. Focuses on gender-based violence with the COVID-19 crisis. On the occasion of this campaign and COVID-19 pandemic, the High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, noted, "We are alarmed by the sharp increase in the risk of gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence, trafficking, sexual exploitation, and child marriages." This year alone, it is estimated that 1 out of 3 women globally was exposed to GBV. The government, during its launch of 16 days of activism that was held yesterday, mentioned that there had been 92.2 increase in the cases reported from January to June of 2020, compared to the same period in 2019. This sharp rise has been attributed to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Increasing trend has also been reported by UNHCR and partners in Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps, where most of cases involving women aged between 18 to 45 years of age. The stories I'm hearing from my colleagues on the ground are heartbreaking, that the pandemic has heightened refugees, women, and girls' vulnerability. This is indeed a worrisome situation that needs urgent action, capitalizing on their resilience. I would like to thank the government and the people of Kenya for the hospitality they are providing to refugees and asylum seekers, some of whom are survivors of GBV in countries of origin during flight and continue to be vulnerable. I would like to acknowledge the effort made by the government toward the reduction of GBV in the whole country by shaping the policies, legislation, and guidelines to address GBV. I also would like to appreciate the support of the resident coordinator being here with us today as keynote speaker. Also the UN sister agencies for their continued advocacy for refugees and asylum seekers in Kenya, in particular girls and women, in a collective effort, leaving no one behind. Here today, I recognize the participation of the government representative, UN Women, UNICEF, UNFPA, and NGOs by taking part in the panel discussion, a good example of us working together in complementarity in the fight against GBV. A fight that we must win now and cannot wait for another day. UNHCR and its partners have enhanced coordination at the national and the county level. This has in turn led to enforced cooperation, ensuring that the most vulnerable people in the community are reached. Moreover, UNHCR and its partners has scaled up services, reaching out with programs to cushion affected refugee families. The aim is not only to reduce, prevent, and mitigate the rise in GBV cases, but also to strengthen legislation to protect survivors and hold all perpetrators accountable. The refugees, girls, and women were at greater risk for GBV even before, and unfortunately continues to increase during the COVID-19 pandemic. UNHCR today reaffirmed further its commitment to addressing GBV across our operation for refugees and their hosts, to support the institutional policy in its prevention, risk mitigation, and response. In conclusion, I would like to look forward to an informative discussion which will shed light on GBV and the impact of COVID-19 on gender, the current trends, and ways to achieve a more inclusive and comprehensive approach with regard to the sub-themes: fund, respond, prevent, and collect. Data, where there is a gap, for example, in enforcing legislation to ensure justice for survivors. Moving forward, my hope is that we will together strengthen and realign our collective effort toward the elimination of GBV and realize the goal of this campaign symbolized by the color orange, bringing about a brighter future where women and girls are free from violence. I thank you. Asante sana.
And we thank you to Fathia Kiala, the UNHCR representative for Kenya, Thank you very much for those really, really touching and moving comments there. We are now going to move to a different segment. And I would like, of course, to request all the panelists that when you're not speaking, kindly, and this is a polite request, to just switch off your video so that the sign language interpreter can be on the center to be able to ensure that all our persons with disabilities are able to get the message. Welcome once again to this virtual event. We are streaming live on YouTube, and now all the systems have been set up on YouTube, and sound is okay. We thank you for joining us. We encourage you all to share your comments, questions, and please do let us know where you're watching from. Livelihoods and community structures are helping to prevent and fight SGBV in Dadaab and Kakuma. Let's watch some videos. As the videos are being put up, I'll just like to all our all the people who are watching YouTube. We've got Euphemia and Yango, we've got Christina, Daya, Red, we have got Doris Kawira, Phones, Lilian Odipo, and many. We've got the videos.
maalintii labaad waan ku soo laabtay dhinaciisa waa imaade dani maade waa la qaabilo wax baa la iga qorqoro kuun baa la iga fata waan ka tagay ilaa maalimihii kala adana la soo waa hurdaan wax ka qaatay markii dambe waxaa la ii diray CTC saxdajin bay siisay aad baan saxday u kacsanay ma xanuunsan baa ii joogan saxday bitaan baa ma ahayn markii saxdajin fiican baa la ii suubiyay هذا اللي هجاجي تعرفي عنه والدي قلبي والدي بركة دمبرة والدي قال وأيها هل في سنة وبدم قال لي جوي على يجري ماشي وحبرشة سفي عن بوقاتي ومصلحة هذا دفول واحد مقف واحد بركة سفي عن عدة الدفاع كرانا دام واحد سفي عن هذا واحد أوان كرا أركوي جوان كركرتان كرا وان جدان كرا دام واحد سفي عن marka ayda way maxsan qoli toona farqo way maxsan diyaarsi aydi wixii ku jooga dhan ayada u fiican aydaha dhan way fiican fikirey waxna siiso wixii dhan fiican faraxsan qalbi fiican aan ku haysta hadda waxa la marka soo orod leeyahay alla ma lacag u siinaan dhaha alla ka soo orod dada illa lacag la siinaan ma qalbi ku haysta in as fiican aada xoog tiigsi aan noo yeeshana tiiro noo dhistaan ama noo fiican dacaawisaan oo caawisteen kor u qaadin وأنت ديارتي أسفي أنت مركزنة عد وذا جوكتا أنت رفاسن باي جوكتا أنا أسفي على عاوسين وكرت جودة عن قبسي وذا يشانو بعلاء وذا فرطان وواحدي عنه وأنا في عنه فكرة فرحتي عنه العوا دماني واحد برشة لا جمر دماني سفي عنه وذا عليه واحد برشة بحاسوس أطاع لحي توان بري مالين لحي توان بري أو DRC UNHCR ku qaban rabaan dabaaldeg oo ka dhaxaysa UNHCR iyo DRC oo ay qaban rabtaa oo 16 beri oo lagu soo doonin rabaa shaqaaqada dumarka lagu soo doonin rabaa
The panelists, the videos are showing on YouTube. Please tune into YouTube to see the video. I'll remind us all again that videos do show on YouTube to the panelists. So during the next video, please tune on to the YouTube link and you'll be able to watch the videos from both Dadaab and Kakuma. We just want to move on to the next segment. Orange the World, Respond, Prevent, Collect. We are now moving to another segment where we will listen to panelists. This segment will be moderated by someone who needs no introduction. She's a former executive director of the Refugee Consortium of Kenya. She's an alumnus of the International Summer School and Forced Migration from Oxford University, and the forced migration cause of Northwestern University in Chicago. She is currently serving in the International Advisory, the Forced Migration Review of Oxford University, and the Refugee International. She holds a Master of Arts in Gender and Development Studies, Bachelor's degree in Social Work from the University. Her name, Lucy Kiano, the Country Director for Highest Kenya. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you, Bernard, for that kind introduction. And thank you all for joining us this morning to mark the launch of the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. Representatives from the government of Kenya, the UN agencies, my colleagues from the NGOs, refugees who are here present, all protocols observed. Today, we are celebrating the launch of the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence during an unprecedented and challenging period of COVID-19. COVID-19 has impacted everyone, but one of the most notable impacts is the increase in violence against women and girls. The gendered impact of the pandemic continues to increase women's and girls' risk to violence and exploitation. As we move on, I would like to take this opportunity to refresh us all on the reason why we are here. What do we want to achieve by the end of this event? And as Fathia had alluded during her speech, I would like to let you know that we're here to create awareness on sexual and gender-based violence. You all know gender-based violence happens in our homes, at the community, in schools, in religious spaces, in offices, and at the society at large. We also want to advocate for inclusion of refugees in GBV programming. We also want to secure commitments from key stakeholders. And finally, we want to call for action in addressing gender-based violence and in partnerships with UN bodies and the government of Kenya. So as we move on, we hope our different discussants will be making those commitments. And I don't like making assumptions. I would like us all to be reading from the same page. So when we talk of sexual and gender-based violence, what do we mean? Sexual and gender-based violence is an act that is perpetrated against a person's will based on gender norms and unequal power relationships. It encompasses threats of violence and coercion. It includes violence based on individuals' sex, gender identity, sexual orientation and expression. It inflicts harm to women and girls, to men and boys, and also to gender non-binary individuals. And I'm glad Fathia has already mentioned the different forms of GBV that we encounter. Having said that, we now move on to a round of discussions. We are going to have 4 rounds of panels, each discussing a component of this year's theme: fund, respond, prevent, and collect. And we are going to start with prevention. So the first panel of speakers will speak to us on how we can strengthen community-based response mechanisms, how community structures can be supported to enhance prevention, identification, and response to gender-based violence. We'll also hear insights on how to enhance documentation to mitigate sexual and gender-based violence among vulnerable groups. We will also hear the lessons learned and best practices associated with community-led responses to sexual gender-based violence during the COVID-19 emergency. And with us to help us get these insights on prevention, we have Emily Obati from the State Department of Gender. Emily is the Deputy Director, gender. She is also in the board of director and FGM board, a member of multi-agency team to aid GBV and FGM. She's also the government focal point on implementation of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. She's the former CEO of National Government Affirmative Action Fund and currently a member of the multi-agency team to investigate issues on child marriage. We will also be joined by our very own Burgi. You all know her. I don't need to introduce her more than that. And we also have a refugee representative, Shukri Santur from Dadaab, who will also be speaking on behalf of other refugees. I would like to say Shukri has 23 years experience in working on HIV/AIDS, reproductive health, and SGBV programming. He has worked with NCCK, UNHCR, and currently works with DRC. He has been a master of ceremony in different events. He presided over the launch of calendar events, for example, International Women's Day, International Day for Zero Tolerance to FGM. Shukri is here representing the refugee community. So to start us off, I'm going to go straight to Burgi. Burgi, how best can we strengthen community-based response mechanisms, having piloted this approach 1 year down the line? Over to you, Burgi.
We would like to remind the panelists to please now switch on their videos, those who have been called upon to speak. Thank you, Burgi.
Good morning to everyone. Thanks a lot, Lucy, also for the question. I mean, certainly what is of key importance is to recognize that communities have resources. And it's absolutely necessary to first identify the existing resources in the community and then to undertake a proper gap analysis in order then to see how can community structures be best supported. Also identification of community-based organizations and to see what is it concretely they need. And then in light of their gap analysis, undertake various activities, which could be training, which could be mentoring, but also resource allocation. And most important also to assist them in to better understand what is needed in order to approach donors, in order to diversify funding. So that I would see as the key important elements. Back to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Burgi, for those great insights and for keeping time. I would urge everyone who will be responding to questions to keep it to a maximum of 3 minutes. We are going to move on to the next question, which goes to Shukri. Shukri, how can community structures be supported to enhance prevention, identification, and response to gender-based violence? Over to you, Shukri.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, representatives from the various organizations. I am profoundly honored to be part of this panel discussion. My name is Shukri Santur Harun. Okay, currently I'm working with the Danish Refugee Council, okay, in IFOCAM in the SGBV programming. Danish Refugee Council is an international organization which implements protection activities in the DAB. Okay, and this include SGBV, voluntary repatriation, scope, and livelihood activities. So, because I've been working in these programs, I'm happy to be able to make presentations and inputs on the questions that that have been raised. Okay, DRC, okay, has been in the forefront and has been targeting, okay, more community structures with trainings and refresher trainings on prevention and response to SGBV. We have been ensuring that we involve the different sectors of the community, ensuring that we mainstream people of different ages, people of different genders, and people who are living with disabilities, people from minority nationalities, and people of all walks of life, to ensure that, I mean, there's inclusivity, and to ensure that no one is actually left behind. Okay, so now the different community structures, we have been training them, okay, involving them in our sensitization trainings to ensure that we enhance their capacities, we equip them with information and knowledge to prevent and respond to violence against women, okay, and girls. Okay, the structures that we have been working with include community leaders, blog leaders, religious leaders, women leaders, the youth, the teachers, okay, CPR committees, okay, and different other community structures, and they have been very supportive, and in terms of disseminating the information to other members of the community. So this was in the light of prevention and the response to GBV. Okay, when it comes to how can we access the documentations of GBV, okay, among vulnerable people. Now, DRC and other partners, okay, have strengthened referral, okay, have strengthened referral, okay, and in collaboration with the relevant agencies, UNHCR and the RAS. So the other question was, what lessons have been learned, okay, and what are the best practices, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic? Okay, now, DRC has trained groups of men as IMAP champions, or they were trained on engaging men through accountable practices. And from the beginning, because we are training them to advocate for the rights of women, owing to the fact that men were perceived to be perpetrators of GBV. So a number of them were raising resistance. Oh no, there's nothing like violence against women. Oh no, women are not facing any problem. Oh, and I mean, a number of them also believed the fact that it's okay to beat a woman, or it's normal for a man to beat his wife. I mean, it's a way of disciplining. So we took them through a long session, a series of kind of trainings, and eventually they have been able to see what exactly we have been discussing. So the same people are now championing the rights of women in the community, and they give us a very, very good. They give us very, very good feedback. That I mean, one of them said, "Oh, I thought as a married man, the house is just mine. The house is mine, and I mean, the woman is just there to serve me. But now I realize that my wife and myself, okay, are part of the family, and this house belongs to all of us. So those men are really supportive, and other people who are trained by DRC are also supportive, and they continue disseminating the same message. So we are trying to reach many, many more people, because we continue targeting many community structures, and in turn they are supporting us reach many more people in the community. So the response so far has been good, because I come from a patriarchal society, a society where culture defines, or culture draws the line between a man and a woman, where culture defines, okay, what a man should do, what a woman should do. So I think so many people have been able to access our information through our trainings, sensitization workshops. We are out there, okay, training people and talking to them. So at least now so many people have changed their behaviors, their attitudes, okay, towards women, and the fact that they really understand women were really suffering for a long time in silence. That now we need to talk about it. That women are about us. We cannot just leave them suffering. Let them.
Thank you, Shukri. Thank you, Shukri. We are going to have many more questions, and I'm sure you are going to add more information. There will be more questions for you later.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry to cut you short because of time. Thank you very much for those great insights, and we can see how refugees have their own resources and capacity, and they're doing quite well on the ground. And I'm now going to have a question for Emily. Emily,
Lucy, I'd like to interrupt you just slightly, Lucy.
Okay.
I'm informed that our keynote speaker, the resident coordinator, Mr. Sidharth Chatterjee, needs to attend to another meeting. So he needs to make his remarks now. Then we will come back to our panel discussions. So at this juncture, I'd like to invite Mr. Sidharth Chatterjee to make his keynote speech, and then we will return to our panel discussion. Thank you, Lucy, and thanks to the panelists for understanding. Mr. Chatterjee, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the accommodation. Much appreciated. My sister, Fatia, the UNHCR representative, colleagues from the United Nations family, the refugees, other civil society members, my colleagues from the UNHCR family, and keep doing the outstanding work you all continue to do. I think today is quite significant. When we started the 16 days of activism yesterday, it is a very clear indication by all of us as the international community that we have to recognize that gender-based violence is perhaps one of the longest running issues since time immemorial. And this campaign is also a long running issue, because what we are seeing is that unless we actually deal with the situation of gender-based violence right at its roots, we will not be able to end it. And therefore, as a UN family, we are all committed to gender equality, the empowerment of women, their rights, and that is absolutely essential. Now, it is estimated that 1 in 3 women will experience sexual and physical violence in their lifetime. And I'm just wondering, we all tout this statistic all the time, but why is the statistic not changing? It's regardless of where we are. It is regardless of the society we belong to, from amongst the most advanced, most developed countries in the world to the most fragile countries in the world. This is one common challenge. And to me, this is as good as a pandemic like the COVID. It's a universal pandemic, and we have to step up our efforts in dealing with it. Now, we know for a fact that during displacement and crises, the threat of gender-based violence increases exponentially. And we know that, statistically, that data is available to us. So gender-based violence has now become, as I said, a shadow pandemic with the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, which is further compounded by limited access to healthcare, other services as resources get diverted to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak, along with exacerbated risk factors such as economic stress and social isolation. Women and girls, ladies and gentlemen, are differently impacted and could face disproportionate economic and social risks as the pandemic exacerbates existing gender inequalities. Survivors of gender-based violence who may already be economically very disadvantaged or dependent on, for example, on their abusers. So refugees and asylum seekers are no exception. In fact, they are particularly vulnerable because of their circumstances and the risks that they face of extreme exploitation. So when the UN Secretary General has urged all governments to make prevention and redress violence against women and girls a key part of their national response plans for COVID-19, he said that with every emphasis at his disposal. And we are now glad to know that 146 member states, including Kenya, have expressed strong support, and the UN in Kenya is supporting the interagency engagement strategy on gender-based violence and COVID-19. Now, while a lot of these interventions have been carried out to support GBV survivors, we need to move from awareness creation to accountability. We have to improve the situation and reduce the number of cases. And some of those interventions include recognizing GBV as a violation of human rights and clarifying the binding obligations on states to prevent, eradicate, punish such violence. This also empowers the survivors as active rights holders. Poverty and socioeconomic insecurity is one of the major factors contributing to gender-based violence, particularly trafficking, early violence, early marriage, sexual violence, intimate partner violence tend to increase in such contexts, partly reflecting ideals and expectations linking masculinity to the provider role. Now, this is an issue also faced by refugees, as women often find themselves becoming the main breadwinner in the country of asylum, reversing the traditional roles. And also note that gender-based violence has negative impact on the economy due to absenteeism from work and prevents women from contributing to and benefiting from development by restricting their choices and limiting their ability to act. The resulting consequences for economic growth and poverty reductions have been recognized by the government of Kenya as an important concern. The number of years a person spends in school has a positive correlation with a decrease in both future victimization and perpetration of physical and sexual violence, strengthening the legal and policy frameworks. Now, this forms an important part of both prevention and response to GBV, while enabling the provision of justice for survivors, the legal frameworks, the punishments that shape norms of society and might work as a deterrent. Research has shown the correlation between strong and independent feminist movements and comprehensive laws protecting women from violence, bridging the gap between law and practice. Now, while solid legislation acknowledging the rights of GBV survivors is a prerequisite, a major obstacle lies in the practice. And this needs to be through strengthening the accountability mechanisms and following up and evaluating the implementation of laws addressing the prevention and response to GBV. Now, the rule of law and ending impunity for GBV. Now, addressing gaps in the police and justice system will promote access to justice for GBV survivors. Perpetrators of GBV must be held accountable under national and international law. Yet, the attempt to reduce GBV by a single focus on prosecuting offenders may not lead quickly to the desired outcome. So therefore, there's a need to recognize the limitations of convictions as prevention through deterrence, combine legal actions with secondary prevention efforts, addressing social, cultural, psychological factors that drive these instances. Addressing sexual and reproductive health and rights. It is important to ensure that they have access to healthcare for GBV survivors in order to prevent the negative health outcomes. And GBV has to be seen as a major security concern and a prerequisite for sustainable peace. Now, increasing women's participation and influence in the context of peace and conflicts is in the humanitarian crisis environment is absolutely critical. And this is something we have to have a collective push towards ensuring. For example, I'm pleased to see that in Kenya, there is already a push towards making sure that the two-thirds gender bill not only is recognized, but better equity and equalization at the National Assembly level. For example, the recent National Dialogue Conference in South Sudan, where refugees from the region and the internally displaced, including women, actively participated. Otherwise, this has devastating consequences for the possibility to achieve the SDGs, peace and security. It is also important to increase women's economic empowerment, to enhance women's bargaining power and the ability to leave abusive relationships. And this includes strengthening women's entrepreneurship and employment. Incorporating men and boys as agents of change. Now, this is absolutely critical, ladies and gentlemen. And I say this because I think regardless of which society we come from, we need to hold up a mirror to ourselves and recognize that GBV is inherent in us as men. And we need to take, as men, take responsibility for it. As men, become the he for she champions. As men, stop it and stamp it and shout it out when we see it happening. There is no space for gender-based violence. As societies, if we have to emerge as rich, economically vibrant, socially cohesive societies, men and boys need to be at the frontier of that change. And that starts with us as fathers, as brothers, as sons, to make sure that in our respective environment, we are able to prevent it. So I'm hoping, Fatia, that perhaps let Dadaab and Kakuma become the role model, not just for refugees, but for the region, that here are refugee men and boys standing up for the rights of women and girls. And I think once we set that ball rolling, trust me, it's a possibility that is endless. And why I say this, imagine the COVID-19 arrived. Most of us today wear a mask when we go out. We clean our hands more often than we've never done before. We are keeping, physical distancing because we are worried that we could actually get infected. People are getting infected. You've seen the European countries and the US reeling against under the egregious effects of the COVID-19 crisis. A crisis of that sort has changed us. Why don't we address the real crisis that we also see, what the known as the shadow pandemic of GBV? Why can't we actually see that change? If we could actually change quickly with hand sanitizing and physical distancing and wearing a mask, we can do this. So we should not camouflage this under the concept of culture and traditional harmful practices. If we as men and boys get ahead of the curve, we can put an end to it. Thank you very much.
We thank you very much, Mr. Chatterjee, for those really, really lovely comments. And thank you as well for being a very good friend to the refugee community and being their champion as always. Thank you again. We will now excuse you.
Thank you.
We are receiving lots of comments on our YouTube. I'll just read one or two before I take you back to Lucy to continue with our panel discussion. From Zakaria Odawa, my good friend from Kakuma, 16 days of gender activism. Refugee women and girls must be protected from the increasing cases of SGBV. Ruth Jabet, 16 days, I'll speak out, give women voices. Zakaria Odawa again. Thank you, Ms. Fatia Abdallah, for the wonderful and strong words to stand with refugee women and girls against SGBV. Carlos Gatlia Mathoat, gender-based violence against women and girls has nothing to do with family issues. It is violence and must be condemned. Stop gender-based violence by creating an ideal community. And from our quote, Simon, preventing and responding to GBV requires an inclusive and collective responsibility. Hashtag 16 days. Thank you very much. We will continue to read your comments as we continue with the discussion. I'd like now to invite Lucy, our moderator for the panel discussions, to continue with that segment. Lucy?
Thank you, Bernard. We continue with the panel discussions. We were to start on question number 3, where Emily Opati will speak to, who will tell us and give us insights on how we can enhance access to documentation to mitigate sexual and gender-based violence among vulnerable refugees. Emily?
Thank you, Lucy. This is Emily Opati from the State Department for Gender. First and foremost, thank you so much for inviting the ministry, that is the State Department for Gender, to be part of this meeting. The ministry at large, Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender, is mandated to coordinate all gender-related activities in the country. And when we talk of coordination, you have to bring everybody on board. It has to be very inclusive. When we are having programs on gender-based violence, our target group is everybody. We talk about women, we talk about men, we talk about children, we talk about persons living with disabilities, and we also talk about our people who are living in camps, that is the refugee camps. My question is on data. First, before I proceed, we all agree that data is a challenge. It has come up in a number of forums. We have data that is scattered. We have data sometimes that is not disaggregated. We have data that is not analyzed, so it becomes a big challenge. For example, at the ministry and the partners, the data we rely on is data that we get from our national hotline, that is 1195. We also look at the data that comes from through the children department, that is 116. We also consider data that we get from the Ministry of Health. And even recently, when we had the issue of teenage pregnancy, we had to come together as a team, and we were in agreement that the coordination of such data should be done by NCPD, and the rest of us are members. So data has been a challenge. And data, if it's not put in, if it's not documented, and if it's not properly analyzed, it will not serve a purpose. So for us to move on and have proper data, first we have to look around and see the various sources that we have of data. How do we come together and work as a team and agree on the strategies, agree on the, that is the storage of this data, agree on how the data should be updated, and agree on how best we can access this data. Yes, it is easier to access data that we get from 1195, that is as a State Department for Gender, because this data is shared. First, the data is collected, the data is analyzed. We have a team from State Department, UNFPA, and the Secretariat of 1195, and this data is shared on monthly basis. But I'm looking at the data that is outside there, not only from the State Department for Gender. I'm sure even the Refugee Secretariat has data. The police have data, and other government agencies, they also have data. So the best way for us to make use of this data is first to bring it together. We collect the data. And once it's collected, we agree on a management system that can allow all of us to access this given data. Otherwise, the data is very important. We need to work together, all of us as a team. We need to see how best we can access this data and to make use of the data. Data without use, data without proper analysis, it will not inform in programming, it will not make any difference. Remember, data communicates and data informs planning. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, the panelists who have given us insightful information, really. And that was Emilio Patti from the State Department of Gender, who just gave us an insightful look into how data is used. Welcome again to our virtual roundtable discussion on 16 days. As we did mention, the theme, of course, is Orange the World. Please continue to give us your comments and your questions on YouTube, and we'll be more than happy to read them. Speaking of YouTube comments, Valentine Marion K, strengthening community structures to respond to SGBV will go a long way in ending this. A safer community means safer people. Eunice Onwanga, community structures are a sure way of sustaining community interventions beyond donor support. It also helps the community to feel part of the solutions on issues. Rachel Ngumi, ending GBV begins with you and me. It is our collective responsibility to protect, promote, and respect the rights of all persons. We will, of course, continue to read more comments and your questions from YouTube. Please continue to watch. Invite your friends as well, so that we can listen to all the panelists give us insightful information. So communities and other stakeholders are responding to SGBV in camps and across the world, really. But how? Before I get Lucy to get her panel to look at respond, I'd like us to watch some videos on how communities in Dadaab, Kakuma, Kalobe, and urban areas are doing their bit to fight SGBV. Just to remind the panelists that the videos will play on YouTube, and you'll not be able to see them on your Teams link. So please switch on to YouTube if you want to watch the videos, and then we will get back here again. Thank you. Let's play the videos now. Thank you.
My name is Samal Joffrey. I work with CVT as a counseling supervisor. And in CVT, before the pandemic came, we provide direct services to survivors of torture and war trauma, whereby we support them with counseling services and also specialized physiotherapy services here in our center in Kalubeye, which is a 10-week intervention with the people who have been selected to join to benefit from the program. We resulted to telehealth, whereby we are now working remotely to support the survivors of torture and war trauma.
Rudisha mkono wako juu kabisa. Rudisha mkono wako juu. Haya ni mazoezi ambayo yanasaidia katika kupunguza maumivu ya mwili na katika kunyorosha misuli zako za mwili.
Our clinical advisors launch intervention, which is the PFA, that is psychological first aid. That is an intervention that is being offered as a telehealth mental health care to our survivors of torture and war trauma. We have a department, another physiotherapy department, whereby we came up with that hybrid telemental health services, that is in person, that has been launched in our Kalubeye Center, currently ongoing, that client benefit from at least 6 weeks in-person session, whereby we have a rehabilitation assistant that works with a physiotherapist who works from home. We conduct a Zoom session, all the protocols that are put in place for the prevention of COVID-19. So the client and the rehabilitation assistants connects with the physiotherapist working from home, and the session goes at most 30 minutes, and every client comes for a session at least care of by our client. It is being consumed well, and we can see good things that our clients are benefiting from the intervention.
My name's James Jesse Masiga, Senior Resident Magistrate and Head of Station Dadaab Law Courts. The motive behind building this court was first to bring access to justice to the people of Dadaab, and secondly, we wanted to build the capacity of the judicial officer. We wish to thank the United Nations for the assistance they've given in this court, at least to ensure that we start and to ensure that people of Dadaab get access to justice. To mark the 16 days of activism, the judiciary is committed to assist the players in this regard region. Sex and gender-based violence have increased, especially in Garissa County. As such, we are committed and we are ready to fight alongside our partners and try and deter these particular offenses.
My name is Lady of Honor. I'm a protection officer at Highest Kenya, the focal point for the LGBTQ individuals. I'd like to talk about the project that's being run by Highest in partnership with the Women's Refugee Commission. This project has 3 main objectives. And the first objective is to increase solidarity between the LGBTQ refugees and the LGBTQ community. The second objective is to provide GBV services and access to these GBV services and to provide information on the same. And the third objective is to increase the strengthen and increase the social ties between the refugee community itself from the different nationalities. So we had a four-day solidarity forum. Key points that were being discussed. We gauged the relationship between the two communities, LGBT communities. There was the perceptions that each community had towards each other, the best practices in terms of dealing with the issues that were presented by the two communities. There were the challenges that were being faced by both communities, and there were the access to services. So where would these individuals be able to access services, both in the urban Kenyan community and from the urban refugee LGBT community. So the last one was for them to come up with practical methods to be able to address these challenges that they faced and to have practical steps of creating solidarity and continuing the conversation. So through the conversations, there were a number of challenges that were mentioned, some of the challenges that was unique for the refugee community and other challenges that were also not just unique for one community, but there was an intersection where both communities were able to express that they had faced some challenges. There were challenges like stigma and discrimination. There was a challenge of conversion therapy. There was a challenge of ostracization and being thrown out by family members. There was the challenges of insecurity. So those are just a few of the challenges that were mentioned by both communities. And then the essence of the forum and the essence of the 4 forums was to ensure that these communities came up with practical steps by themselves to be able to contribute towards having conversations and engaging in each other's spaces so they can be able to increase the solidarity. So some of the activities that were mentioned that were key for these 2 communities to be able to increase their solidarity was, for example, the game drives and football sessions where, for example, GBV issues are being discussed. And in these football sessions, individuals from the Kenyan community were to come up with fun activities that will incorporate the refugee community as well. So that through those conversations, they are engaging actively with each other. So in light of this, each community came up with practical steps and to end intimate partner violence and gender-based violence as a whole, and that has been the project. So thank you very much.
We thank you once again for joining us for this virtual event that we are having today to mark 16 days. As we did mention, of course, it started yesterday and it will run all the way to the 10th of December. Those of course who are watching us on YouTube, remember that you can share your comments and we'll be more than happy to read them, your questions as well. Also, please do let us know where you're watching from, and we'll be more than happy to say hi to you. There is a tweet here. Violence against women and girls is a global emergency requiring urgent action at all levels, in all spaces and by all people. That is by Antonio Guterres, who is the United Nations Secretary General. Let me just read 1 or 2 comments before I hand you over to Lucy for the panel discussion. Carlos Gatlia Mathuat, engaging men to take responsibilities to ensure the safety of women and girls in refugees and host communities is paramount. David Mwamkita, GBV is an impediment to social and economic growth, and it's even worse among the refugee population and currently exacerbated with the COVID-19 situation. I couldn't agree more. Valentine Maria, incorporating boys and men is vital in this fight. Juma Jos, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. And then Ruth Data, it's a double pandemic. We are losing gains fast. Stay focused. We need everyone's commitment now more than ever. We need men, CSOs, donors, the government, the community. Leave no one behind. Having said that, I'm going now to hand you over to Lucy Kiam, who will take us to the next sub-theme of respond to understand how communities are responding to SGBV issues in the community. Remember, the hashtag is 16 days. The hashtag is Orange the World. Please do share your tweets and we'll be more than happy to share them. The theme, Orange the World, fund, respond, prevent, and collect. And now, Lucy Kiama on respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. My apologies to all. I dropped out for a moment because of internet, but I'm glad to be back. So we have the second round of speakers who are going to talk about respond. This panel will focus on the key aspects of gender-based violence response, the provision of shelter and safe spaces for high-risk cases. We will also hear from them the future plans of the government of Kenya, the NGOs, civil society, in relationship to addressing this identified gap. So to help us understand the response initiatives, we have a couple of speakers. We will have Emily Opati again. We have Shukri coming back. We have Elijah from RAS. We also have Anna, and I would like to introduce Anna more. Anna is the country representative of the UN Women in Kenya. She is a gender equality advocate and women's rights lawyer with 21 years experience. She holds a master's degree in women's law and honors degree in law, both from the University of Zimbabwe. She has worked with UNFPA, UNICEF, UN Women, and the Zimbabwean Women Lawyers Association in programming and senior leadership capacities in Zimbabwe, Uganda, and Kenya. Her achievements include support to legal reforms on gender discriminatory laws, support to institutions of justice, law, and order to fully implement gender-responsive laws, and support to women and children to assert their rights. An alumni of the Akina Mama wa Africa Young Women Leadership Program, Anna is passionate about mentoring young people and positioning them to lead. We will also be joined by Boogie in this panel. This panel will discuss one question, and all of them will respond to it. And the question goes, one of the key aspects of sexual and gender-based violence response is provision of shelter and safe spaces for high-risk cases. This has been identified as a critical gap countrywide. What are the future plans of the government of Kenya, NGOs, and civil society organizations in addressing this identified gap? I would like to invite Emily from the State Department of Gender to start us off, and the others will follow. Emily, over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. And as you have put it right, this is a gap that has been identified because we have cases where the perpetrators are members of the family. You have cases which cannot continue being in the same, homestead. So it's important to have an alternative way where these survivors or the victims can be placed on a short-term basis. And I've just mentioned that it has an issue, and the ministry, through the State Department of Gender, takes it seriously, and it is concerned or looking into ways on how best we can improve and look around on the issues of shelters. And you find that in working, the Minister of the State Department, in working around this area of response, we don't work alone. One, we have the gender working group, gender-based violence working group that meets since COVID came in on weekly basis. Apart from this team that is meeting to look into challenges, to look on how best to do the placement, we also have what we call the multi-agency team. You had in yesterday's meeting, thank you for those who made it, that we have a multi-agency team that was approved at the cabinet level. So the multi-agency team, together with the State Department for Gender, are looking into various response mechanisms when it comes to issues of gender-based violence. So first, you post on the future plans that the government of Kenya and other partners are looking around this issue of shelters. One is building on coming up with a strong partnership on how to tackle gender-based violence-related cases in terms of response. And you find that in partnership, we partner with our development partners, we partner with the state and non-state actors. Like for this very case, we have the Shelters Network. the shelters network that sits in the gender-based violence working group. And in our partnering with the shelters network and other partners, we first decided to do the mapping. That is, we know we have some shelters outside there, but can we do the mapping to be sure on what we have and what needs to be done to strengthen what is already in existence? But let's note that as we talk now, we have, in fact, almost none shelter that is run by the government. Most of the shelters we have, some of them are just started on goodwill of individuals. Most of them are privately owned by the community, by the members of the civil society. So when we did the planning, when we did the mapping, it revealed that we have 41 shelters throughout the country. Although this is a process that has to continue, we have to continue updating it. And out of these, Nairobi has 11. But also, as the State Department or as government, under the Ministry of Public Service and Gender, we are also partnering with the county governments. We are also partnering with some of our sagas, whose mandate also allows them to look into the issue of shelters. If I may give an example, we know we have the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, that is which we famously refer to as NGAF. In their mandate, in the guidelines that established NGAF, it allows them to look into issues of gender-based violence and issues of shelters. A number of the counties, you know, NGAF, we have our women rep as patrons. They put up some of these structures. Like we have one in West Pokot. We have another one in Bungoma. We have another one in Kiambu, just to mention a few. But the problem is the structures, the physical structures that have been put up have not been operationalized. Like you look at the one in Kiambu, it's now serving a different purpose. So as the government, we are looking at what can we do or which measures do we put in place to make use of the structures that are already in place. Then another point on that, what we are doing, you know, in partnership with UN Women, and I'm happy the country director is here, we have developed the safe and protective space guidelines for safe spaces, establishment of safe spaces and shelters for women, girls, and children. So these guidelines, we actually launched them when we had the GBV conference last year in October, and we are in the process of disseminating. Just before COVID came in, wanted to disseminate so that they can be used, but they can serve the purpose as to why they were put in place. Then also, in terms of coordination, we are also coordinating, I mentioned, with the county government, because we know county government, we have structures that are not in use. How best can we make use of those structures? Then let's not forget, because one of the, when we look at our theme for this year, there's the issue of funding. We are also looking around, moving forward, as we build strong partnership with our partners, with our donors, with everybody. The government is also looking into ways of also establishing funds for the shelter so that it is well sustained, because there's one point in starting a shelter, and there is another point in sustaining that shelter so that it runs the purpose. On shelters, just not to forget to mention, during the COVID period, we know we have our 1195, and a number of cases were actually rescued from remote counties to Nairobi through the services that we have under our toll-free line, which runs for 24 hours at the State Department for Gender, where cases are reported, counsel on phone, and rescue and referrals are done. So moving forward, as I conclude, strong partnership with everybody, with the community. We have mentioned issues of the community because these safe spaces are established within the community. So in programming, in coming up with some of these structures, we make it a priority also to involve the community among other players. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily, for enlightening us on what the government and the partnerships that you have. I would be happy to see those guidelines that were launched, that you talked about. So thank you very much. For the other speakers, I would request that we manage time and we keep it very short. I'll ask Shukri to start us off. If you have any comment on shelter and safe spaces. Shukri?
Yeah, thank you. What I wish to say is that for the time being, there are very few safe spaces in the DAP camps, like the Safe Haven, which is run by DRC. So we need to have in the future UNHCR, DRC, and other partners should work together to establish more safe spaces, for GBV survivors, because I mean the spaces that we have are so limited, and we need more safe spaces for survivors. Secondly, I mean DRC and other partners should try and work with the Safe Home volunteers, in the community. That's a community support group, so that they provide temporary shelter and temporary accommodation for GBV survivors. I'm aware that there's already there are safe home volunteers in the community, but there are not many. We also need to have many more safe home volunteers. So we are looking forward to see that the agencies are working with safe home volunteers, so that GBV survivors are provided temporary shelter and temporary accommodation until the cases are handled. Yeah. On the other hand, we look forward to see DRC, UNHCR, and other partners, working with the community structures, other community groups, including the religious leaders, including the elected refugee leaders, including women's groups, to ensure that GBV survivors, are supported. GBV survivors are provided access to information, access to psychosocial support, yeah. And most importantly, UNHCR, DRC, and other partners should work together, to continue advocating for the rights of women, the suffering of women in the communities, the fact that violence against women is affecting women, and to ensure that they reach many more people in the community. At least now,
thank you, Shukran. Thank you, Shukri, for your kind remarks regarding shelter and safe spaces. We will be involving you more as we move on with the other panels.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. I'm now going to call upon Mr. Elijah Kandi to respond to this question. Elijah?
Thank you very much. What we can say is that from RAS, that is Refugee Affairs Department, it is a component within the government that is entirely dedicated to refugee affairs. And there are two things that we have observed when it relates to gender-based violence. We realize that there are some processes which are very crucial, especially when it comes to documentation. We fast track, we do counseling, and also we have a vocal point. Because when these challenges occur in various camps or in various places where refugees are involved, you find that if one partner or another person is not registered, sometimes it becomes a problem. You find that there's no way a refugee can be able to go and complain because she fears she has no proper documents. So that in such areas, we normally fast track. And we have taken first priority, especially to our girls and women when it comes to serving them. That's one area, because if they are not served in advance, they are actually vulnerable and they are likely to be abused by other people because of their environment. And what we also do, we do a lot of counseling, and where we identify challenges that cannot be solved, we refer to various partners. I think basically we do a lot of consultation with the various partners who assist when it comes to providing shelter and also spaces. The rest are more of operational within Iraq. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kandie. We are running out of time, and so I'm going to request the other speakers to only take 3 minutes. If you see my face, my video on, just know your time is up. So I'm going to ask Anna Mutavati to speak to this question of shelter and safe spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. So I'll just start from the point of view where we from UN Women, we just think that perhaps there's not been proper understanding of the role and value of shelter, safe shelter. So we keep reminding government, we keep reminding stakeholders the importance of ensuring that there is easy access to shelters for women and children who need them when their lives are at risk. So we always draw a comparison with, you know, during the World War I and II, when people had to go into bunkers to escape from bombs that were coming, you know, bombing their homes. So they would take refuge and shelter in bunkers, perhaps like underground, right? Until the danger passes. It's the same idea with safe shelters. They are not a luxury, they are a necessity to save lives. So the more we continue to pitch it that way, the more people show a better understanding of what really is involved with the shelter and why it is important to allocate resources on an urgent basis to those that are in need. Now, very quickly, we've seen, therefore, that where our leaders get it, they do make the right choices. They do make the right decisions to allocate resources, like we've seen from Makweni and Kisumu, that have started, you know, using their own resources to establish shelters that are owned and driven largely by the counties themselves. So it is an example that it can happen where our leaders understand. So that's where we need to keep talking so that they see that it is doable and not always wait for donor funding. Yes, donor funds can come to top up, but they should show that if lives of women and children matter to them, then, you know, it makes sense that they allocate their own resources and then call other partners to say, hey, we've come this far, please can you come in this way and that way. And thirdly, moderator, as I'm concluding, I want to also mention that private sector partnerships are very, very important. We've seen how this has worked in South Africa and in other countries where, you know, private sector can come in, even identify buildings, or where a building has been identified, then private sector comes in with the food, with the supplies, and all those things that are needed for a comfortable and dignified stay by survivors in that shelter. So we should also explore how we bring in private sector into this discussion so that they also contribute, because after all, women are the biggest consumers of everything that private sector produces. My last point is what my colleague from Ministry of Public Service and Gender has said, that this is an area that also requires proper regulation, because what we know is that there is different points where shelters are being registered, right? So some are registered under this, some are registered under that, but it is a very delicate area of work which really requires us to follow properly the guidelines that have been put in place, which were launched yesterday. So for all of those who are online today, please do make sure that you get a copy of the guidelines and that you adhere to the guidelines and to just make sure that we increase the safety and security of the people who are using our services. So thank you, and over back to you, moderator.
Thank you, Anna, for those great points. She has summarized it very well, and we are going to hear more from her when we are discussing funding. We're going to move on to Boogie. Boogie, would you like to add any other points?
I will be brief, since many of the issues have already been mentioned. I think it is important to really acknowledge that SGBV survivors face different situations. And for some, safe house is the immediate solutions, but I think it's important to also look at other type of arrangements within the community, be it community safe housing, because we did have persons accommodated in the safe house, and actually they were then saying, look, it had a real psychologically negative impact on us. So again, it is important to see what different options are out there. Funding has already been mentioned by various speakers, and I think it is important, as Anna was also saying, not to wait for development funding, but also already to see at county level through the county assemblies to actually provide and foresee some of the funding. And of course, one of the ideal situations is to work on safe communities, because if you enhance the safety of communities for girls and women, then actually you no longer need to deal with the issue. Back to you, Lizzie.
Thank you, Boogie. I should have allowed you to be our timekeeper. You're doing very well. Thank you very much. We have a short commercial break. Bernard?
Thank you very much, Lucy, and thank you to the panelists as well. That was very well expounded there. Just very quickly, we will read one or two comments really from our YouTube page. Just to say that we're getting a lot of comments from those who are watching. We've got Zainab Abdi, who is watching from Garissa, actually. Welcome, Zainab. She's at the UNICEF Kenya Zonal Office, and she's a child protection specialist. She says, great discussion. Thank you, Zainab. Philip Thiong Cho, SGBV isn't just about the female gender, rather both genders through the female gender is the most hits. Orange the World is the hashtag he's put in there. Thank you very much, Philip. Just one or two others. TDH has child-friendly spaces and SGBV screening center in Hagadera refugee camp in Dadaab to identify and respond to GBV cases in the camp and host communities. Orange the World is the hashtag. And Sophie Karimi, last but not least, says, Kakuma will always be in my heart. It helped start my career in humanitarian work, GBV in emergencies specifically. And she says, we did our launch yesterday, and some of the emerging areas looked at capitalizing on women agency, prioritizing on localization, as well as tapping on more innovative measures in GBV programming. I think in the interest of time, I will hand you back to Lucy, who will take us through to the next segment. I think it's fund. Lucy, back to you.
Thank you, Bernard. Our third round of discussions are going to focus on fundraising for GBV programming. I believe this is a topic of interest to many of us. Resources are needed for GBV programming, and they are never enough. So to help us get some insights on fundraising, we are going to have Mr. Aziz Gedil Helenov. Aziz is the Deputy Representative in Kenya for UNFPA. Aziz is from Turkmenistan. He has been working with UNFPA since 1997. Before his joining to Kenya team, he worked with as UNFPA Deputy Representative in Yemen, UNFPA Regional RHCS Advisor, Humanitarian Focal Point at Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Regional Office, and also Emergency Coordinator in Sudan Country Office, responsible for UNFPA Humanitarian Fund in Darfur. Aziz holds Doctor in Medical Sciences, scientific degree in pediatrics from the Institute of Pediatrics of Russian Academy of Medical Sciences in Moscow. We'll also have Anna again join us in this forum. We'll also have Sean Rokenga and Monica Nulud. And I would like to introduce Monica in more details. So Monica is currently working as the Chief of Child Protection in UNICEF. She worked previously with the Office of the UNHCR as the Senior Protection Advisor for Children. She has worked for the last 20 years in the field of child protection and humanitarian affairs. She has also worked with UN OCHA and with the Department of Peacekeeping Affairs UN mission in Sudan, as well as Save the Children. She has a bachelor's in law from Columbia Academy, University, Finland. She also has a certification as a registered nurse and community worker. Welcome, Monica. So this is the team that is going to help us understand the following questions. Number one, what are, with the effects of COVID-19, which continue to cripple our operations, what innovative ways can the operation adopt to fundraise for GBV programming? That will be the first question. The other question is, in the UDAF spirit of coordination of activities and UN delivering as one, how best is UNHCR, UN Women, UNFPA, and UNICEF planning to achieve this with limited funding for SGBV programming needs in the humanitarian sector? It would be good to hear how best the UN bodies trickle down the coordination on the ground where real interventions are taking place. How can UN bodies ensure that there is no duplication of efforts or even funding on the ground? We have noted that there is duplication that leads to overfunding on some of the sectors, while some of the sectors are limping. Thank you. So I'll ask Mr. Aziz to start us off. Over to you, Mr. Aziz.
Good morning, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to underline that this is a pleasure for us, for UNFPA team, to be with you in this important event. As you know, the President of Kenya, during the ICPD 25 Nairobi summit last year, committed to end GBV by 2030. So UNFPA has been working closely with government of Kenya and partners in accelerating this and other Nairobi summit commitments. It is obvious for the sustainability of GBV program, we should apply to innovative financing in order to find out mechanisms for the predictable financing. At the same time, there is question, how much should we invest to GBV program in order to have enough funders? If you remember, in the Nairobi summit, there was presented global investment case for how we can achieve zero GBV by 2030. And investment case showed that we should generate $42 billion in 130 priority countries in order to come to the end of GBV. But this is global. There is very clear that we need country-specific investment case, in our case for Kenya, in order to know how much funds we need in order to achieve zero GBV in Kenya by 2030. Of course, after summit came COVID-19, and this investment case development should include also impact of COVID-19. Currently, UNFPA, with government of Kenya, working on the disinvestment case, also investment case on end of FGM, end of child marriage, end of preventable maternal death, and end of unmet family planning. So once we will complete it, and we are expecting have it beginning of next year, we will know exact cost of end of GBV program. And here, by taking this opportunity, since we have limited time and limited funders, I want to underline the scaled up coordination between UN Women and UNFPA by having regular program coordination meetings, although we are different agencies, and together addressing to the priorities jointly by signing, if needed, special agreements. It increases impact of GBV related program interventions and contributing to value of money where we operate with the limited budget. At the conclusion, under the funding, in our point of view, I want to underline that mobilizing resources, standalone GBV programs could be challenged. It showed that when we had this global humanitarian response plan at the beginning of COVID-19, there we had only for GBV 16 countries, some amount of money. For 16 countries, we got only 43 million globally out of 63 countries. So it means standalone GBV programs to mobilize the resources will be challenge for us. For this, in our point of view, we should strengthen integration approach, integration of GBV with other sectors, including private sector's contribution, in order to have a multi-sectoral approach for mobilization of resources, as well as implementation of our GBV prevention and response programs. Regarding UNDAP, we are in Kenya, we have UN delivering as one. It means it is based on the better coordination and spirit of partnership. In my opinion, when I discussed it with my colleagues in UNFPA, we thought that we should look closely to our comparative advantages when we are discussing humanitarian programming needs within this landscape of limited funding. For example, UNFPA advantage is having widespread SRH programming throughout of Kenya, which provides a natural entry point for UNFPA to increase GBV survivors' access to safe and quality health care, including psychosocial support and clinical management of rape. Second area, this is joint utilization of standby partners, search specialists. For example, we did it at the beginning for the GBV coordination. Quickly, we got international GBV coordinator by agreeing with State Department for gender. But we can jointly to use this resource also. And also, I think, yes, we are working within the UNDAP, and we have a lot of coordination mechanisms within the UNDAP. But I think we somehow to build up horizontal coordination, as I mentioned, UNFPA, UN Women, in order to use our mobilized limited funders together to the urgent priority issues by taking into consideration value of money. Thanks a lot. All the best.
Thank you, Mr. Aziz, for those few remarks and for keeping time. I wish everyone else can keep time like that. So I'm going to invite Mr. Sean Rokenga to also speak to this question of funding.
Thanks a lot, Lucy, and good afternoon, colleagues from the UN family and from the government and from civil society, but also our friends, refugees. I would leave my colleagues Monica to go to more details on the question. I just want to highlight one issue, which is linked to what was said a bit earlier. I think we all agree that SGBV is a great is human rights violation, is a serious human rights violation, which affect boys, girls, men, and women. But of course, it affects more girls and women. But we should not forget that in those who manage cases, there are cases of boys and men who are also affected. Although the majority of the survivors are rather, women and girls. And there are a lot of interventions that can be done at different levels, at the community level, at the organization level, but also at the government level, that will not require necessarily funding, but rather, change of mindset. We've all said that during COVID time, a lot of children, but also women in the houses, in the communities have been subjected to sexual and gender-based violence. To stop this in their communities, what is required is change of mindset, change of social norms. But of course, to do further work in preventing and responding, we'll need funding. And for that, let me hand over, with the permission of moderator, Lucy, to my colleague, Monica, that you presented, our Chief Child Protection, to provide more details on behalf of UNICEF. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you. Monica, you are muted. Kindly unmute.
There we go.
Thank you.
So thank you for inviting UNICEF to be part of this really rich discussion. So many kind of thoughts and ideas that have already come out from different perspectives and different actors. So the question I had was around funding, fundraising, but I'm going to focus a little bit more on public financing for gender-based violence programs and child protection programs. I think it's very easy to think kind of in a humanitarian mindset that when we talk about responding to gender-based violence, that we are talking about fundraising and thinking then about external donors. But I think in light of the Global Compact of Refugees, it's also important to look at budgetary allocations at the national level that funds programs that are inclusive and available for everybody in the country, in this case Kenya. When we talk about budgetary allocation for GBV, gender-based violence programs, we are of course looking at both prevention programs and response programs. But as these, the interventions are cutting across so many different sectors, justice, law enforcement, health, social service, and so on, it's quite hard to really pin down in terms of what is actually being allocated for gender-based violence. So that, I think, is one of the challenges. But we do know that there is significant return on investment when we invest in programs for gender-based violence. I think several colleagues have already talked about the cost to societies of violence against children, violence against women, gender-based violence. UNICEF did some work or is some ongoing work on child protection costing, and we found that in 2017-2018, the impact of sexual violence for health, education, security sector, and the future productivity really represents a loss of 2% of the annual GDP of Kenya. This is quite significant, I think. So there is a return on investment if we program in this area and resource it. There is also a cost of inaction, of not doing anything. So by not investing at all, it still creates costs. We've also, as part of this child protection costing work that we did, which also includes gender-based violence when we talk about children, We found out that the investment of the government of Kenya was about 76 Kenya shillings per child. So that represents approximately 0.12% of the annual budget. I think this has now gone up a little bit, but still I think there is room to grow there. Then finally, also coming back to development partners, again, the Global Compact of Refugees is really looking at how we bridge the humanitarian and development nexus, and looking at investments in counties that are hosting refugees. So here UNICEF has supported a study on looking at what the investment should be in Garissa and Turkana counties to have child protection systems that are addressing the needs of all children in these counties. This is work still in progress. But I want to say that I think that we also see development partners, World Bank, IFC, bigger development partners, development banks coming into this field. But as a protection person, I still feel that the investment is very much focused on infrastructure, education, on the hardcore sectors, which is important. But I don't see the same kind of investment in the social sector, which is the sector that is primarily addressing gender-based violence, as well as justice, law enforcement, and so on. So my call is here for development partners to really consider investment in the social sector, because we see that there is benefits and there is return of investment in investing in this sector. Thank you very much.
For those, sorry, I am mute. Sorry. Thank you, Monica, for those great remarks on funding. I think we are taking home quite some tips on that, and I hope all partners have taken note of that. Bernard, if you allow me, I want to go directly to the next panelists who are going to be speaking on collection of data is critical.
Sure. Please go ahead, Lucy.
Okay, thank you. So in the interest of time, we are going to have 3 speakers, and this is Emily Opati. Boogie will also speak to the data question, and also Monica will come back. And I would like them to answer this question. Why is it so important for UNHCR and the State Department for Gender to collect and harmonize data on sexual and gender-based violence? Why would it be important to include refugee information in the national data? I know Emily had alluded to this, but we can go and give more insights to this question. What needs to be done to achieve the main goals and objectives of data collection, including advocacy for linkage of survivors to national sexual and gender-based violence services? We've noted that different organizations have different systems of collecting data. How can we synchronize these systems into one national system? A system that speaks to all these systems to give us particular data sets that can inform national statistics. For example, the segregated data on gender, age, diversity, and all that. Why is it important to profile refugee women and girls at global events? For example, the Conference on the Status of Women, CSW, the UN Security Council resolution, comprehensive refugee response framework. Why is data important for these regional and international forums? And I call upon Emily to start us off, and please keep it brief.
Thank you, Lucy. I think I had earlier mentioned something about the data, but what I can say now is data, that is an important component of data. Yes, hello? Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but our sign, Rosomolo was speaking. Okay, she's back. All right, you can go on, Emily.
So what I'm saying that an important component of data is harmonization. And when we talk of harmonization, it's a process. And we need to come up with a standardized. First, we need all of us to be on the same page. When we are talking about data, when we are defining what data is, are we on the same page? So we need to standardize issues of definition of data. What elements of data are we looking for? Because all of us are in the gender world. What kind of data are we specifically looking for? And as mentioned earlier, data can only be of use, can only be of importance when we harmonize it. We come up with a system to harmonize and see how best we can do that. If I may just mention, maybe for as we move on from the government side, we have a partner that is Reinvent, which is helping, or we are in collaboration to come up with an app that is going to help in collection of all gender-related, that is GBV-related data. And the way the app is being designed is from the time the cases are reported up to the time the cases come to an end, maybe through prosecution. So we are looking forward to have this app, and we hope by having this app, we are also going to maybe see how all of us can make use of this centralized way of having data. Otherwise, data scattered, every organization having its own data may not help us too much. Thank you. Back to you, Lucy.
Thank you very much, Emily, for that. And I see Lucy's back. Lucy, please take over.
I'm back. Oh, thank you. The button for unmuting had refused. Thank you. Let's have Boogie give us a few comments on data, and thank you, Emily, so much for your comments.
Thank you, Lucy. I cannot more agree with Emily, because I think harmonization of data is key. And if different organizations collect different data or have different definitions, this is not helping us in our fight to not only to assist SGBV survivors, but most importantly, to see what can be done in order to prevent GBV incidents in the first place. I mean, we would be more than happy, and I understand that my colleagues are part of the GBV working group in order to see, to provide our input from our refugee perspective, because as part of our progress before, we do have a GBV module, which is tailored for case management. And I think in that context, it's then important to see how the different systems could talk to each other. So we're talking about interoperability. So absolutely agree, harmonization of data. And also, Emily, what you said before, you collect, you analyze, and then you use the data. And I think this is then most important is what type of data do you collect? How do you define the different GBV incidents, and that different stakeholders engaged really use the same formula in order to understand what is the scope of GBV incidents in a certain area. And when it comes to refugees, I mean, as UNHCR, we are really very appreciative of being shared the data also from host communities, because at the end of the day, it's not that only refugees are being targeted or only host communities. I mean, we have GBV incidents all over, and this then allows us to have more targeted area-based interventions. Back to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Boogie. And we have Monica coming back again to talk to us about data. Monica. Please unmute, Monica. You are still muted.
I'm so eager to come in, so I'm just starting to speak.
No problem.
So, I mean, data, of course, is essential for programs. How else do we know if we are targeting correctly and if we are making any impact? I think I'd like to share one experience from the child protection sector, which again, also includes responding to gender-based violence for children. And I think the more sustainable way to address this is about the establishment and support for administrative data systems at the national level. So we have supported the Department for Children's Services to roll out a countrywide child protection information management system, which is now available in all countries or in all counties. one thing that what we see that is we are kind of harvesting out of this this investment now is that we now have kind of countrywide data on child protection, including sexual violence, which is being updated by children's officers in the field and in the counties. And therefore, because of this investment, for the first time now in the latest Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics economical report, there is a section on child protection and kind of drawing on the data from this administrative data system. And that to me is really kind of the longer term and sustainable manner to ensure that we have sufficient and accurate data on gender-based violence or child protection. The other kind of way to go, of course, is to do surveys. The Center for Disease Control and the government of Kenya undertook a violence against children survey in the end of 2019 in Kenya. This is kind of a countrywide wide survey that is really, how do you say, statistically representative, and therefore really a solid piece of work. What is interesting is Kenya is one of the few countries that actually has done 2 of these, so we can now make some comparison to the 2010 Violence Against Children survey. And that puts us in a very, very good position to kind of already start to see trends in terms of how the changes are happening. Well, but then one thing, even if I said it's national statistically representative survey, it did not include refugee communities. So I think that is a gap, and I see that we still are struggling with sampling in refugee context. When you're looking at a nationwide survey, how can we ensure? I mean, if you just sample normally, you would not capture refugees probably. So how can we do kind of a look at sampling methodologies that are allowing us to get data also on marginalized populations like the refugee community? So that's one thing that I wanted to highlight and put again out as a challenge there. But more importantly, as has been said, I mean, we have all the data, we are collecting data, harmonization is an issue, but more importantly, what do we do with the data? And I think that was really highlighted by I think the representative from UN Women. So and the Ministry of Gender. So when we have the data, how do we make sure that we actually act upon it? Even the data that we have, that might not be perfect, but we can still use it to guide our programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for the additional information. It's really getting clearer why we need data. We need to harmonize data. We need to know what elements of data that we are collecting, and refugees need to be included. The affected population needs to be included in this data discourse. So thank you. We are going to have a short commercial break from Bernard. We are running out of time, but we'll come back and answer a few questions that have come up. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you, Lucy. Let's use this opportunity to prevent and end violence against women today and every day. Who said that? Cindy Sirinya. She is the Regional Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women. And there's a tweet: we kick off 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Show solidarity and orange the world by supporting women and survivors of violence to stay safe and free of violence. That's a tweet by UN in Kenya that just went up. There's a comment from our YouTube as well. Fatuma Roba from Dadaab, she's the field manager actually for FilmAid, bringing women and men on the same table to discuss issues that affect women on GBV is important. Safe House is a mandatory community structure to support such facilities is a key. We've also got comments from Marcin Dunge, Valentine, Mariam Kane, Sabiman as well, Juma Jos, Aukot Simon, Eufemia Nyango, and we've also got audience all the way from Nigeria. Thank you, everybody who is watching from our YouTube channel. Truly, truly much appreciated. Before we go into question and answer, I'll, of course, remind everybody that if you've got a question, please post it on our YouTube channel, and our panelists will respond to that as we come towards the end. Before that, we've got a short video from campus to show how the community is responding to SGBV. So the video, and just to remind the panelists that the video will not play on your Teams link.
DRC has been mandated by UNHCR to run protection-related activities along the lines of SGBV prevention, response, and including child protection. This year has been particularly of great interest to us because it has enabled us to appreciate and realize the importance of capacity building our community structures. We have, of course, seen the importance of ensuring that we get the community workers that we work with who we source from the refugee community. Has been mandated by UNHCR to run protection-related activities along the lines of SGBV prevention, response, and including child protection. This year has been particularly of great interest to us because it has enabled us to appreciate and realize the importance of capacity building our community structures. We have, of course, seen the importance of ensuring that we get the community workers that we work with who we source from the refugee community and who actually act as a very crucial link between us and the community because they live in the community and tend to be the eyes and ears of all agencies who work towards ending violence within the refugee community.
Tangu nifanye kazi hii, niajiriwe kufanya kazi hii, nilifanyishwa training, nilipewa ujuzi na nimekuwa na ujuzi mzuri wa kuweza kujibadilisha mwenyewe na kubadilisha familia yangu na vile vile kubadilisha community. Sasa hii ninajiamini ya kwamba ni mtaalamu wa kufacilitate na vile nafanya mobilization, nafanya identification huko kwa community na vile vile nafanya field visit huko kwa community.
EMAP stands for Engaging Men Through Accountable Practices. This is a 16-week curriculum through which men are taken through on how they can become allies to women. And when I talk about an ally, I mean it's a person who listens to the opinions of women and supports women's ability to take up opportunities equally as to the male counterpart.
I was traumatized physically, psychologically, and emotionally. EMAP has done a lot to me. You know, it changes my behavior. You know, I'm better now. I am not like before. And I wish that if EMAP continue every year like that, I think the community is going to change like me.
In the formulation of the interventions for this COVID-19 pandemic period, we of course have factored in issues of age, gender, and diversity. And with that in particular, we've established that there is an increased risk for adolescent girls and young women, especially during this period. And for that, we have of course developed the mentorship program, which of course protect themselves and become resilient and establish positive coping mechanisms. This has of course been done through the involvement of the mentees' parents, the mentors themselves, and of course the most relevant person here, who is the mentee.
Mentorship, gisa edwana sedi. Go diana deresa de bini atae, kodi bini atae ay no deresa. Asam beside ana ke mustaqbal. Mentorship wodila na fikira ana seja bini atae, u bini atae asmana asa uya de gigeni. Bini atae magide urusambala gigeni pibet gaso makalamta ana mokta makalamta mentorship.
This year's theme on 16 Days of Activism is Orange the World, Fund, Prevent, Respond, and Collect. DRC, in collaboration with other partners, will seek to provide holistic services to SGBV survivors over and beyond the 16 Days of Activism period.
يوم أحمل توبة أو عقلي لقى بحنا لك وانكو صولات وان لقيت مالين تلابات وانكو صولات دنا عديس واي مالي داني مالي والي قبل واحد بالي يقر قروكم بالي يبغى وان كحلي لا مالي مين خلا دنا ليش هو ودان وحنا قاتل مركي ذنبي وحال يجري سي صحد الجن بيسيس بان صحد يوقع سنة ما حنو صبا يجوغن صحد يجتام بمهن markuu saxda jinti aan baa la isoo bi aaga la hagaaji lacagti aan waa la siiyay qalbiga waa la bisi markii dambana waa la qaaday oo ayaga halkii sano oo dambo la iga gooy hal ii diray meeshii oo waxbarasho si fiican baa u qaatay oo maskaxdeeda difuul waa in qof wax barto oo si fiican cidii ku difaaci karto waxaan soo socotaa 16 beri maalin 16 beri oo DRC iyo UNHCR ku qaban rabaan dabaaldeg oo ka dhaxaysa UNHCR iyo DRC oo ay qaban rabtaa dumarka waxaa lagu soo dumin rabaa.
My name is Samal Joffrey. I work with CVT as a counseling supervisor. And in CVT, before the pandemic came, we provide direct services to survivors of torture and war trauma, whereby we support them with counseling services and also specialized therapy services here in our center in Kalubeye, which is a 10-week intervention with the people who have been selected to join to benefit from the program. We resulted to telehealth, whereby we are now working remotely to support the survivors of torture and war trauma.
Rudisha mkono wako juu kabisa. Rudisha mkono wako juu. Haya ni mazoezi ambayo yanasaidia katika kupunguza maumivu ya mwili na katika kunyorosha misuli zako za mwili.
Our clinical advisors launch a new intervention, which is the PFA, that is a psychological first aid. That is an intervention that is being offered as a telehealth mental health care to our survivors of torture and war trauma. We have a department, another physiotherapy department, whereby we came up with that hybrid telemental health services that is in person, that is has been launched in our Kalubeye Center, currently ongoing.
I will hand
that
you
client
over
benefit
to
from at
Lucy
least 6 weeks.
to give us the questions and answer. It won't be long, but once again, thank you very much for those who have joined us and continue to engage. Let us all unite to end the violence during COVID-19 and beyond. At this particular moment, I will hand you over to Lucy to take us through the Q&A. Lucy.
Thank you, Bernard. I think we've had very many comments and very few questions, which is okay. I'm going to read the first question, and this I'll direct it to Kandie. I hope he's still with us. With the current COVID situation, what are the plans of the Kenyan government to ensure that refugees residing in all parts of the country are able to access essential services, including documentation, health services, among others? Kandie, if you can come on board and respond to that.
Thank you very much. What we are doing currently, we are operational. Sometimes we have our helpline. You can call and you can be assisted. We can book a day for you. You come and we serve you very well. What we are also doing is that we're also ensuring that any movement of any person, refugee, from one point to another, they have to undergo COVID-19 test. And we also cooperating with other partners, ensuring that their welfare actually is well taken care of. It's not an easy task, but we are trying our level best. So in a nutshell, we can say that we are operational, and all camps, all urban centers where Refugee Affairs Secretariat is based, we are operational. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kandie. I have a question that will go to Boogie. Boogie, what are
Sorry, Lucy, I did not hear the question.
Sorry, I think I got muted by mistake. Sorry about that. So the question is, what are the plans of all agencies working with refugees to fully resume services in the camps and also in the urban areas? Over to you.
I think what is of importance is that here the government, and particularly here Ministry of Health and WHO, have provided guidance of what should be done during COVID-19. And certainly it is important to adhere to this guidance, because at the end of the day, COVID-19 does not differentiate whether you are a national, whether you are a refugee, or whether you are an international staff member. So therefore, precautions have been taken in order to ensure not only the safety of the refugees, but also of the safety of the other people. So arrangements certainly are in place to provide services. However, as what has happened to a large degree, through virtual counseling, through virtual communication, it might not be ideal. We would certainly agree with that. But then at the same time, it is of paramount importance to ensure the safety of all people. But certainly, depending on how the COVID-19 situation develops, certainly then more services are being delivered again. But as Mr. Kadir already said, we do provide services, however, not as we have done before. Back to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Boogie. I have one more question, and I'm going to request Anna, if you're still with us, to respond to this one. Education is one of the protection pillars against early marriages among young refugees. What is your take on the recent issues that are happening with the education sector in Kenya, and the delay in getting back our children back to school? Over to you, Anna. Is Anna still with us?
I think Anna had unfortunately to leave, Lucy.
Okay, no problem. So I'm going to send this back to Kandie. Kandie, could you attempt this question?
I didn't get you clearly.
Okay, so the question is, education is one of the protection pillars against early marriages among young refugees. What is your take on the happenings at the at the education sector in terms of the delays in getting our girls back to school?
Right now, what we are doing, actually, we are trying to liaise with the community leaders all over the country, and we're also using other government organs or agencies to assist us in addressing the issue of education among the refugees. Actually, we are totally concerned. Despite the current challenges that we are undergoing, progress is still is ongoing. That is one thing that we are actually focusing on. And also, we're also encouraging refugee girls and children to go to school. Even those who are in urban areas, we encourage them, despite the various challenges they are facing, but we are monitoring them in one way or the other. So what we can say is that we are still struggling despite the existing challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have one final question, and we conclude on this session. How do we lobby the government to invest more in the social sector? Can I request Boogie to take this?
I think one of the key approaches, and I'm just now seeing whether Emily is still with us, because I think it might be of importance to listen to Emily of how does she sees could be the way forward. I think most important issue is to have a good understanding of what are the issues, of recognizing what would be the investment worth. I think Monica made some references of having relevant surveys which do show the data and which actually then provide the information if you do not do certain things, if you are inactive, what are the costs for the government. And I think that is certainly of importance in order to have as an entry point to raise further awareness. So to really understand what could be a win-win situation for the individual, but also for the government and for society. But maybe I would encourage Emily to come in order, I would very much like to listen to her of how does she see this issue. Emily?
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. If I got it right, is how do we lobby the government to invest in issues of gender-based violence? From my end, the government is already on top of things. The government knows the issues around GBV. The government takes it as a priority. And if I may give an example of what we are also doing as a government, we have done much by way of, communicating the same to the parliament. So you see, once through the ministry, this matter is communicated to the parliament with maybe what we expect if we have to handle these GBV issues, especially during the COVID time, we leave it now at that level. And once we get a response, that will be okay for us, a positive response. But what I can say, we have to continuously create awareness. We have to continuously make even members of the county assemblies, members of the national assemblies understand the issues around GBV. And for partners, I think I can also say it's important for us also to have some kind of a costed plan. Like, how does it cost to handle a GBV case? Then from there, it's easier for my seniors, when they are also engaged at another level, to be able to express themselves from an informed point of view. Otherwise, as government, we are far much aware, and that's why we are building on partnerships, but on our side also, going way forward, there's something that has been done and forwarded to the parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you all, the participants and the panelists, for your great questions and for your great participation. I now hand over to Bernard to help us with the closing. Thank you very much.
I thank you very much, Lucy. Violence against women and girls is a horrible and widespread affront to their human rights and a blight on all our societies. Let us all unite to end the violence during COVID-19 and beyond. That was by Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, a quote attributed to his speech as well. We have now come to the end of our virtual roundtable discussion. Many thanks for joining us. Let me thank all the people who joined us on YouTube, the members of the refugee community, members of the host community from Turkana County, from Garissa County as well. Really, we also want to thank all the panelists, Ms. Emily Opati from the State Department for Gender, Ms. Anna Mutavati from UN Women, Mr. Ezes Veldi Helena from UNFPA, Mr. Jean Lokenge and Ms. Monica Neelan from UNICEF, Ms. Walpurga Engelbrecht from UNHCR, Shukri Santu, Refugee Community Representative from Dadaab. I also want to thank Mr. Elijah Kandia from RAS, and Ms. Fatia Abdallah from UNHCR for their open remarks. The keynote speech as well, Mr. Sidharth Chatterjee, the resident coordinator UN in Kenya. I also want to thank Robin Liambila from UNHCR Kakuma, Asha Ngonze, UNHCR as well, Karen Kotut, Daniel Mureithi, Cynthia Mwega, Ariadne Kipriadi for all the support from Nairobi and the field, Henry Maneno from ICT, Rosa Molo, our sign language interpreter, Lucy Kiama, my co-host. My name is Banadrono. I leave you with a final tweet. COVID-19 has put many refugee women and girls at a higher risk of domestic violence. Shukri from Dadaab raises awareness and supports victims. Community champions like him make UNHCR Kenya's efforts to prevent and respond to gender-based violence possible. That is a tweet that will go up shortly by our UNHCR country representative, Fatia Abdallah. Thank you again so much, everybody. It has been insightful. It has been full of new knowledge. And remember, hashtag 16 days, hashtag Orange the World. Thank you again. We are now closed.